So, okay. You level up your craft, you put in the hard work, and then your ship comes in. So let's talk about Sarah Crow goes to bat for you.
Yeah.
She gets you
Yes.
this wonderful deal that, and for esteemed audience, I ask your permission up front before we start talking about it. Although this is, I believe, I found part of this on your website. You get a 6-figure 2-book deal for your debut novel. Everybody's dream, right? I mean, that's about as good as it gets.
Absolutely.
So where are you when you get that news? What is that day like?
Sure. Well, actually, I'm going to back up just a little bit. What happened was Sarah made me an offer. I signed with Sarah. We did a very light round of edits before we went out on submission, just a few tweaks to the novel. And then she shared with me her submission list and went out on submission. But remember, I had been out on submission for 6+ years prior to that. So this was not a huge deal to me. Like, I was excited about Sarah, of course, but I was expecting at least 2 or 3 months before I heard anything at all from her. So I went back to doing what I usually do, which is writing and working on stories. So I was sitting at my desk about a week to a week and a half after we went out on submission. And I got an email from Sarah that said, there's an editor who's interested in your book and she wants to know what else you're working on. And I had just 2 very short paragraphs about my other 2 books that I was working on at the time. And so Sarah sent those off to the editor and I thought, okay, well, that's really exciting. That's encouraging. Wow, that was fast. Put it out of my mind, went back to work. A week later, I got an email from Sarah. Again, I was sitting at my desk in my, I'd like to say sweatpants. I was probably in pajamas, sweatpants. I was sitting at my desk and an email flashed across my screen that said an offer, and it was from Sarah. And so I opened up my email and she had just literally forwarded the offer from my editor. And her note was just, can we talk? And so I started screaming. I read the offer and I started screaming, and my teenage daughter was just outside my office. And so she came running in and I was like ugly crying, sobbing. And so she turned on the camera and started clicking photos and I was screaming, and I quick emailed Sarah back and said, yes, but I need to finish ugly crying first. So my other teenage daughter ran in and the 3 of us were jumping up and down and screaming and crying. And I was hysterically reading this email out loud because I didn't know at first that it was a 2-book deal. So first I saw that I got an offer, and then I saw that it was a 2-book deal. And then I saw that it was a really, really good offer. So I was just absolutely hysterical. Finally calmed down, got on the phone with Sarah. I should say the offer was from Greenwillow Books, Martha at Greenwillow Books. And Greenwillow is an imprint that publishes the most beautiful literary stories. They are an imprint that I have admired my entire career. When I used to go into bookstores, I would pick up their books and just, hold the books and dream of being a Greenwillow author. So getting an offer from them was just truly a dream come true. And certainly I wouldn't have admitted this to Martha at the time, but I would have just accepted the offer on the spot because I was so thrilled. And Sarah said, well, I think that they would be a really good fit for you. Let's go back and see if they'll put just a little bit more money on the table and do a preempt so that we don't have to go to auction. This was in early May of 2020. So we were in the first month to 2 months of COVID. Nobody knew what the world was like. Nobody knew what publishing was going to do. Sarah and I did not want to get in a position of looking like we were, being greedy and trying to go for more money. Like, that's not what it was about. I was already really happy with the offer. So I said, Sarah, just go work your magic, make whatever decisions you want to make, talk to the editors, let me know. I love Martha. I love Greenwillow. I'm in. I love this offer. So she called me back the next day and she said, yeah, well, I talked to them and they really, really, really want your book. And so they've doubled the offer. And at that point, I pretty much just dropped the phone because, as I said, I would have accepted the previous offer, which I really hope my editor is not listening to this. But
it's too late now.
Thank you, Martha. So that was it. I said, I'm done. She said, we could still go to auction. And I said, really, I'm done. Greenwillow's the perfect home for me. So that was it. She accepted the offer, and then it was maybe another 2 or 3 months before the contract came in. So you always hear that things are really slow, and that's really, really true. It truly was at least June. In fact, I think it might have been July even before I was able to announce. So it takes a really long time. And I didn't know anything about the contract process. Sarah took care of all of that. Like, she's just an absolute wizard. So she sent me the contract and said it's ready to go. And I said, great, and signed on the dotted line. And then we were able to announce. So that's sort of how it all unfolded. It was magical, though. I have to say it was really incredible.
May to July, and you're shaking, wanting to tell everybody that you could ever read. I'm assuming. Like, let me hop on Facebook and tell everyone I went to high school with. Guess what?
Yes. Yeah.
So during that time, plus, the world's kind of sort of falling apart. So plenty of reason already to be anxious, to be wondering, how is all of this impacting publishing? How is this impacting my contract? What does that 2 months look for you? Is that a time look like for you? Is that a time of great turmoil, or do you know that Sarah Crow has got this? You focus on your writing, or a little bit of both?
I mean, certainly it was a time of great turmoil for everybody. My anxiety was sky high. I had a lot of trouble focusing. Fortunately, I didn't have an edit letter yet, so I didn't have to be doing any work on The Wolf's Curse. But I did know that I had a 2-book deal, and the second book was unspecified. So I had quite a lot of anxiety about what that would look like. So at that time, I really buckled down and tried to flesh out this second book idea and what that might look like. It wasn't easy. That book took me, well, really up until now to write. That book took me a full year to write, which normally I write my first drafts in a month or two. So certainly COVID slowed down my writing process and my ability to focus a lot. But I just did my best to let Sarah do her thing and focus on the next book, because after having written for 13 years, I know that's all you can do. At the end of the day, all you can do is focus on your next book.
And so when you have an unspecified second book like that as terms of accepting the offer originally, and I'm assuming somewhere in there you got paid, once that happens, that second book has to happen. What does that look like? Do you go back to the trunk and say, hey, I wrote 6 other books. Are any of those good here? Or do you write full ideas for pitches and see where Sarah and Martha are on them before you start writing? Or do you just write the book of your heart and hope it works out? How do you navigate that?
Well, I had another book that was a little over half written that I really, really loved. And that was one of remember I told you I had sent the 2 paragraphs off to the editor. And I figured, since she made a 2-book offer based on one of those 2 paragraphs, she would probably want one of those 2 books. So I just worked on fleshing out both of those ideas. One of them was a half-written book, so I worked on polishing that a little bit more, and then I worked on fleshing out more of an outline for the second book. And I started to do some thinking about just strategic brand planning. What do I want my career to look like? One of the books I absolutely love, but it's more contemporary with a hint of magic, whereas the other book is ultimately the book that's going to be my second book, and it was much more in line with The Wolf's Curse. And so I had a pretty strong feeling that was going to be the book they were going to want. So I put a lot of time into fleshing that idea out. And then it was maybe around December that I sent the idea to my agent, to Sarah, and she forwarded it on to Martha. And then it wasn't until the beginning of May of this year, I take that back. It was end of March, beginning of April of this year that I heard back from Martha, and she said, I want this book, the second book, the one I thought that she would choose, the one that's much more in line with The Wolf's Curse. She said, but we want to publish it fall of 2022, because then it's exactly a year out from The Wolf's Curse. That means that I need your first draft by the end of May. Can you pull that off? So that was essentially 8-ish weeks that I had from the idea, getting the idea approved by my editor, to writing the full manuscript. So that was pretty wild. And, we're still in the heart of COVID. My focus is still not good. So I had been, like I said, picking away at that story. So I felt pretty good that I could pull it off, but it was a really, really intense 8 weeks.
Well, there's no sudden calm in there. There's like, hey, even if I don't pull this off, I'm getting paid. The contract says.
No. For me, it was really just about, wanting to get the story out there and wanting to make it the best story that I could make it. Again, focusing on craft.
Let's talk just a little bit about being paid as delicately as I can without becoming crass. But that is something I know that every author is, not every author, but a lot of authors are hoping that, oh my God, that's the day I'm quitting my day job. Goodbye, the moment I sign that contract. 6 figures, that sounds wonderful. Does a truck pull up to the house and they just the front lawn?
That's exactly what happens.
So without getting into your personal finances, what can you tell us about what to expect when that happens?
Sure. I'm trying to recall the exact details of the contract. I believe that it called for 50% to be paid out upon signing of the contract. So that would be 50% of the first book. So within maybe a month of signing the contract, a direct deposit was made into my account of 50%. And then I received this, no, actually, I think it was 50% of both books were paid out upon signing the contract. I'm fairly certain that I got a complete payment.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I got the payment for the second book when I turned in my, I think it was somewhere in between developmental edits and copy edits. So that was close to 6 months later, I guess, or maybe even closer to a year later. I lose track of time. But in any case, you have to turn in a manuscript before you get your full payment for the book. And then the last payment is going to be made probably in the next few months when I turn in a edited manuscript for book 2. So for me, I think it was supposed to have been paid out in 4 chunks, but because when I signed the contract and the first book was due with such a short time frame, I think they ended up paying it out in 1 chunk. But I will say I am really lucky that there was only 3 or 4 payments, because I think right now with COVID, a lot of contracts are calling for maybe 3, 4, or 5 payments spread over quite some time. So I don't know if that was Sarah working her magic. Like I said, I just let her do her thing. I have no idea if that's what they originally proposed or if that's what she negotiated for me. But when you have Sarah Crow in your corner, you don't really need to sweat those kind of details because she just makes it all happen.
So, and Sarah Crow, Martha Mihalik, I think I'm saying that, Mihalik?
I'm not sure, actually. I've only spoken with her once on the phone. We do all of our communication by email, so I need to figure that out.
If you're listening, Martha M., you are show Sarah Crow. You're welcome on the show. Please come on. I have so many questions for both of you. One more in the weeds questions about money, and we'll move on to editing. But when that money hits the account, obviously, I'm assuming that's minus the percentage that goes to your agent. Mm-hmm. They don't take any taxes out of that, right? You got to save that back for when the tax bill comes at the end of the year.
That's right. So normally you have the amount that is set to be paid out by your contract, and that amount goes directly to your agent. They take their commission and then they send you the rest. Because you're an independent contractor, you probably need to look at paying quarterly taxes. Now, my situation is even more complicated than that because I'm an American expat living in Canada. So I have to deal with the differences between Canadian tax law and US tax law. So we don't have to get into all of that. But yes, the agent does take their commission out of that. So when you think about even a really big book deal and you start dividing it out into getting paid out over multiple years, and then the agent taking their commission and then needing to pay up to, in some cases, 40-ish% in taxes, that really pretty big number can end up being really a pretty small number at the end of the day. So, it's certainly something I'm grateful for, but no, it's not like airplanes were flying overhead just dropping bags of cash into my yard.